Hi, Francesca. Thank you for joining me. So, continuation of discussions around sort of different cultures and working in different places. Francesca's impact manager based in Singapore, which is where we met, but fascinating background, having grown up in the Philippines, lived in France, London, Spain, and now Singapore. So, lots of rich cultural differences that you've experienced and adapted to, whether or not you've realized it at the time. Um, so maybe if we get started with what were some of those biggest differences as you've moved that you've maybe surprised you or had to navigate around?
I would say one is I mean, having grown up in an Asian culture, you're always very much trying to keep faith. And so having lived in France for most of my adult life, I would say that the directness that they are and they're very tact in their way of being kind of is quite surprising and kind of hard to get used to. So I would say that is probably one of the biggest things. And then now moving back to Singapore, where okay, you have to go back to another kind of culture, is something that I currently working on and starting to learn more about.
Hmm. And so, how have you adapted as you've moved around?
I guess it's also kind of just in terms of personal growth. So just trying to be a little bit more explicit on what my expectations are, and trying to communicate with either that's colleagues or friends. Um, but really just being a little bit more communicative and also being a bit more um, uh, in line with how the culture is. So obviously there's certain where they're fine when you communicate it this way and they wouldn't even see it as rude.
Hmm.
However, in Singapore, sometimes that could be even borderline disrespectful. And so just also being somewhat conscious of, okay, how is it the best way to let this person know or X person know? And just trying to be more conscious of cultural things. I mean, obviously you can't get everything correct. So like I don't know, one thing I noticed in France is they love like saying niceties to each other. So like they leave the door open for you whether you're pregnant or not and say hello when you enter the elevator. And you have to say goodbye when you exit it. And then
Hmm.
in Singapore, nobody says anything, and you're kind of like, oh, am I being rude? Am I not?
Yeah,
So just trying to just also understand those kinds of things, what the cultural contexts are.
I agree. I think being aware of those differences makes such, and then being curious about it and saying, okay, so did I get something wrong, or what's the right way, rather than just carrying on in your own style, regardless. Definitely helps with fitting in.
Yeah. And I've learned sometimes I just ask. So before I never used to ask
Hmm.
what this I should do. And I mean obviously you have to ask a trusted person. You don't ask just random people. But I have learned that like oh that random lady on the street. I have learned that asking does help and saying, okay, did I come off as X or did I come off as too pushy or like how
Hmm.
should I have done better? Is also quite helpful.
Yeah, I think sometimes take advantage of the fact that you know you're different and can therefore be a bit more naive and question things.
Yeah, and to be honest, I use that a lot, um, or like I use that. I've been able to get away with a lot of things, mainly because I'm a very petite person, being Asian, being female, so very stereotypical. But I kind of try to use that to my advantage whenever I can.
We
There are
use everything you've
disadvantages
got.
to it. Yeah, exactly. Using my strengths.
Absolutely. And is that a thunderstorm I hear in the background of Singapore?
Yeah, no, it is pouring rain right now. Like I don't see 5 meters in front of me.
Wow. And so, what do you miss about being in France compared to where you are now?
Ah, seasons. I don't miss winter though, but I do miss change of weather.
Yeah.
uh, but apart from that, what I do miss is kind of uh this this acceptance to have a life outside of work. I mean, to be honest, like the company where I work in today is actually not that Singaporean, so they're actually pretty good. But I feel that in France there was even a more like it's like culturally accepting to not answer an email after 6 p.m. I mean, they have that droit de connexion, the déconnexion, like the right to disconnect. And I mean, it also depends on the job that you have. But there is that cultural understanding that you have life beyond work and that you are expected to take days off, that you don't feel that like, like here it's so funny. Like we have colleagues that we have to push them to take their leaves, right? Because like they just don't take it. I mean, like, yeah, I'm just like, just take a leave, stay in Singapore, walk your dog every day. Like, just take some time off. And they're like, no, no, no. And then so at the end of the month, at the end of the year, they have like 20 days left. And you're just like, well, I'd never see this in France. At the end of the year, people are just like, oh, no, I have no more days left. It's the complete opposite. So it's quite funny.
Yeah, I've never had that issue. I've always choose my leave.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think, and that's one thing that I really noticed when I moved to Europe. Like I felt really bad asking for days off. Like I was just innately very scared to ask for days off because I felt like it was a privilege rather than some form of right. But now obviously I've been converted. I was like, oh yeah, here my days leave. I have 30 days off. Yeah, I'm gonna take all those days.
Important for rest and recovery.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
reflection.
Exactly.
Yeah. And do you have any tips for somebody that's making a move either into France or from France into Singapore that would help them?
I think into France, I think one thing is to not take things personally. So I think, like I said, so because they're very direct, they don't try to hide what they're feeling, right? So like if they're pissed off, they'll just piss you off too, right? So you're like, wait a minute, I just met you. So try not to take things personally, take things like a little level and like just say this is what they feel and that's how it is and it has nothing to do with you. I do think that I struggled with that a little bit about how they were, I mean, like how when people come to France for the first time, the French come off to them as rude, and it's not them being rude, but it's just that's how they are. Kind of thing. So that's one thing. And second is just enjoy, like they really have that what they call the joie de vivre, enjoyment of life, and it's in all forms. So I think one of the things I also had to struggle with was like if it's not in their job description, they're not gonna do it, even though you're a nice person. Because I think in other like in Asian cultures, most people kind of go out of their way to help you. Even if it's no longer in their job description. And I just don't accept that, right? And do the same for you, right? So don't be that person. If they're not willing to do it for you, then you have no obligation to do it for them. Because they will ask. So it's not like they won't ask, right? So there, I think that's one. And then from France moving to Singapore, I would say, I mean, it's just, I think it also depends on where you're going to start working. I do believe there's a huge difference if you are working in a purely Singaporean company than if you're working in like in a European company or even American company. Because I do feel like my colleagues, I work for a European company, right? But most of my colleagues are Singaporean, and they're mostly saying like, yeah, this is they work-life balance is well accepted here. I mean, within a Singaporean context, compared to others. So I guess just understanding, be wary of that, right? Especially if you're coming from a European mindset, that work culture here is very different, and that to a certain extent, you're expected to work 50, 60 hours a week. And just be mindful of that, I would say.
So know what you're going to get yourself into.
Yeah, or like, exactly. Or look for companies where you know that it's not like, the culture is a little bit different or the team is different. I mean, that's kind of why I chose the company I'm in now, because I knew that I would still be able to have the work-life balance that I want, compared to
Hmm.
other companies that I was looking for or that I was in the process of recruitment.
Hmm.
Um,
Great. Well, thank you so much, Francesca. It's fantastic to hear some of the differences and your experiences, and hopefully will be helpful for other people as well.
oh, I hope so too. Thank you for
Okay.
asking me to do this.